Thanks for joining me for another cup, tapping into your conscious power. So I talked a lot about controlling our state, our emotional and mental state. And truly, I think that's where, and it's such an important topic, by the way, that's where the real differences can be made versus how we may find ourselves now. If I sit and ask myself, how many times during a normal day am I acting consciously? And I would say it's probably less than 5. Now, maybe you don't admit to that. And maybe my answer shocks you that it's so low because you do feel that you act in a very conscious way. Or maybe you're shocked that it's that high, that maybe you feel yourself only feeling it a couple times during the course of a normal day. Otherwise, your day is already kind of running on autopilot. There's a lot of things put in place prior to that day that dictate how your day goes. And you may consider that to be acting consciously. I put a plan in place weeks ago, months ago, or years ago, and I'm still following that plan. And absolutely, that is part of acting consciously because we are following a plan of our making. But what I'm really asking you about is that a plan of your making? How many plans did we make in prior time that we've let fall away? And what plan do we replace that with? There's the question, which is, if I'm following a plan, whose plan is it? And if it's not mine, then how conscious am I? So there's 2 parts to acting and behaving in a conscious way. One is making sure we have a plan. If you don't have a plan, then you will be acting less consciously by nature. Because as you go into that time frame, whether it's a day, an hour, or a week, then you're really less conscious. And there are a lot of different ways to define consciousness, but really it's doing what you want. It's behaving and acting, even if it's not your plan, but you're taking action because you choose to. It's really the epitome of personal agency is acting with consciousness. In fact, if you look at your day and your efforts with your work and you find you're not following your plan but you're following someone else's plan, that's perfectly okay as long as you're doing it consciously. You're making the decision that I'm going to follow this plan because it makes sense to me, it resonates with me, it will help me to get where I want to be. So I'm not saying necessarily that it's bad to fulfill or exceed other people's expectations. But how we do so, are we consciously aware that that's what we're doing? So all of us may work for someone or for a company. And we may sometimes feel like, wow, I really don't have a choice in what I do here. The truth is you always have a choice. And maybe that's part of the consciousness, the level of consciousness, the self-awareness that we behave with. It comes from knowing, and again, I talked about this in the message, that being curious and having an awareness is the beginning of all of this. If you are aware that you are in a situation where you are working on someone else's plan, but you've made the decision that that's the best course of action right now, that's acting consciously. What happens many times, though, is we are unconsciously following a path, a direction, or a plan that we don't even know that we're following. We simply go through the motions. That is the opposite of behaving consciously, is going through the motions. So what I'm hoping this message helps you to do is to gain an awareness of your power. Because we sometimes, and I did a message quite a ways back about the upper limit problem, where sometimes we put ceilings or limits on ourselves. And why do we do that? Well, it's because we don't want someone else putting higher expectations on us that we may or may not be able to meet. But the truth is, there is no ceiling on our own power. And that's exciting. But to the extent that we utilize that power, that is in direct proportion to how consciously we live and how consciously we utilize our own power. The simple fact that you can put yourself in any state that you want at any time, that's incredible. And it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be such a surprise or such a revelation that we can do this. I love good stories. And good stories, the reason I like good stories is because they capture the consciousness of a situation. And I love to hear and see and be immersed in situations where my state, I'm put in a state that somebody else has, and I can understand them more. In fact, that if you can't be conscious to someone else's state if you're not conscious of your own. That's where a lot of prejudices and assumptions come from. But if I'm consciously and intentionally working on my own stuff, then it's much easier to have a connection with the consciousness of another person. And that's the connecting point we find with a lot of people, isn't it? When we connect with someone, then we act with consciousness and intention, don't we? When we don't connect with someone, we feel a little out of control. We feel like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know why this isn't working. But it all comes back to how connected are you with your own consciousness, your own intention, and your own power and control. That's what I hope you take away from today, is that your power to control your behavior by controlling your state is virtually unlimited. The only limits are those that we put on it. So I'm asking you now to tap into that power as often as possible. And it's not self-indulgent. It's actually self-fulfilling. That's the difference between, say, the hedonistic approach of just enjoying something versus being conscious and taking the time to connect with our consciousness, our intention, and our power. So my hope is that we all can take a little bit of time to tap into that. That is probably the best investment you can make in your work, in your week, and in your lives. Thanks for joining me and having another cup and discussing how to tap into your consciousness and your power.